Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Maybe you're wondering what the heck I'm wearing. I'll try to get the whole thing in view. Well, the reason I'm wearing this is because we have a special theme week this week on Chef AJ Live. We are featuring Food is Climate. It's probably the most important book you'll read right now. It's written by Glen Mercer, who's helped me write so many of my other books, and it's a really important book, and you can see some very important people have endorsed it, like Dr. John McDougall and John Robbins, forward by Philip Wolin. So we're going to have the author Glen introduce each guest this week because he took a bunch of wonderful chefs, many of them PCRM cooking instructors, to contribute recipes to this book. And they're going to show you a few of the recipes each day from the book. So to introduce today's special guest, we have Glen Mercer. Hi, Glen. How are you?
Good. Hi, AJ. Thank you for having Food is Climate Week.
Great. So what does that mean, food is climate? What, food is climate? Huh?
Well, what it means is that the way we create food is actually the leading cause of climate change. Now, whenever we hear Al Gore and the leading climate spokesman talking about climate change, they always talk about the burning of fossil fuels. And that's important. That's one of the reasons we're facing a climate emergency. But the number one reason is animal agriculture. It is the leading cause of climate change. So what I'm going to do, AJ, every day for this week, before I introduce our chefs, your guests, I'm going to do a 2-minute lesson on climate change. So if everybody tunes in every day this week, by the end of the week, especially if you also read the book, you'll know more about climate than Al Gore. So that's the goal.
And speaking of reading the book, if they buy the book, you're offering a tremendous bonus. We have that link in the show notes.
Yes, there's the book itself, which is a very short book, so you can read it in a couple hours. But after you read the short book, you then have 65 low-fat, Chef AJ approved, I would say, no salt, no sugar, vegan, low-fat recipes.
No oil, of course.
No oil, no sugar. And so these are healthy vegan recipes. I'm not interested in people just being vegan. I want people to be healthy vegans. So they're all healthy recipes. But in addition to that, if you send in your proof of purchase of either the paperback, the audiobook, or the Kindle version to foodisclimate@gmail.com, I'll send you a bonus of more than 25 more healthy recipes from my terrific chefs, including, by the way, AJ has 5 recipes in this book. AJ has 5. So that's the bonus. Buy the book, send in proof of purchase, and you get 25 additional recipes.
Thanks, Glen. Who have you got for us today? Or did you already do your Food is Climate lesson yet?
No, I have to do my Food is Climate lesson. Okay. Here's the 2-minute lesson. The lesson is why is animal agriculture the leading cause of climate change? And the most important reason, there are many reasons, but the most important reason is called carbon opportunity cost. It's what would happen if we had more trees to save the climate. You see, carbon dioxide is carbon dioxide is carbon dioxide. It's the same molecule, whether I breathe it out or it comes out of the tailpipe of a car or it comes out of a smokestack. So what most climatologists look at is how much greenhouse gases are we putting into the atmosphere with smokestacks. But what they need to look at is how many trees could we have sequestering it, taking it out of the atmosphere and turning it into wood, because that's the solution. We used to have 6 trillion trees on the planet. We now have 3 trillion trees. We need at least 1 trillion more. And where can you put 1 trillion trees? And the answer is the grazing land. 40% of the land on Earth is being wasted for grazing. So if we reforested the grazing land, even if half of it got reforested, and more vegetation on the grazing land, we would be able to pull down enough carbon dioxide to get us back to where we were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So the only solution to climate change is to end animal agriculture and end grazing. That's the lesson for today. And I want to make a prediction. And my prediction is that by the end of this week, if everybody tunes in for these lessons, buys the book, reads the book, makes the book a bestseller, we will see a great reduction in air temperatures by Sunday. So that's what I'm predicting. We can lower the temperature on the planet by Sunday. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce my friend Mark Cerkvenik, one of the great chefs in this book. And I'll tell you a little bit about Mark from within the book. He used to work in the healthcare field, and he used to wonder, there's got to be a better way to deal with doctor visits and all the sickness in our country. And so when Mark himself adopted a whole food plant-based diet in 2018, he saw a tremendous improvement in his own health and a path to maintain a healthy weight. In addition to being licensed by PCRM as a Food for Life instructor, Mark provides coaching, workshops, and seminars for those transitioning to a sustainable plant-based diet. You can find him at letseatgreat.com. He's also got some kind of a travel gig that he might tell AJ about. So I'll let it go at that. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Cerkvenik.
Great. Hello. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Mark Cerkvenik here. I'm in beautiful Chicago, actually a suburb of Chicago called Mokina, about 35 miles outside of Chicago. It's kind of chilly here, so I was kind of laughing. Chef AJ, you were saying that it's cold where you're at. It's 70. I'll trade you. It's 31 here today. So,
Mark, I'm used to it being like in the 90s. So like 70 is pretty cold. That's why.
yeah, got it. So, great. So there's several recipes. So I am one of many instructors that are in Glen's book, Foodisclimate. And if you when you get the book, if you turn to page 112, all the recipes minus one, and we'll talk about that today, that I'm doing is in Foodisclimate. And these are recipes that I've curated and developed either through family or that were full fat, non-vegan recipes, and I've converted them. So pretty much any recipe out there, you can convert to vegan, as I'm sure most of you know. The first recipe I want to talk about is one that was handed down to me back from about 1961. I have a handwritten copy of the original recipe, and this is in the book, Foodisclimate. And I'm calling it Uncle Mark's poppy seed cake. So those of you that are Eastern European might be familiar with a poppy seed cake, especially around the holidays. Well, this cake was originally a full fat cake, so it was made with butter and sour cream and creamed sugar and all that kind of good stuff. Well, having gone now whole food plant-based for coming up on 4 years and being a Food for Life instructor, I missed the flavor of this cake and really wanted to recreate it in a low-fat vegan way, if you will. So it's in the recipe again is in the book. And what I've done with this recipe is instead of creaming butter and sugar together, essentially what you do is you take plant-based milk and dates. So it's 3/4 cup of dates and plant-based milk. And you blend those together until you basically pulverize, puree the dates. And that adds to sweetness. So we've got the natural sweetness of the dates that's incorporated now into this poppy seed cake. The other thing that I've done is instead of eggs, this recipe in the past, it called for 4 egg yolks and egg whites. And what I've done is use chia seeds. soak chia seeds in water, and the recipe calls for 4 tablespoons of chia seeds in a cup of water. You let those sit and they gelatinize, and then they create a binding agent. You don't see those in the cake, right? Because of the poppy seeds. There's a full cup of poppy seeds in here. And instead of oil and fat, the other added ingredient that I add, and I do this a lot with baked goods, is added aquafaba, which is that viscous liquid in chickpeas. And so that goes in here. It goes in a bundt pan, and then you cook it up and you bake it for about 45 minutes at 350 degrees, and it just turns out wonderful. The recipe originally I made called for all-purpose flour, and I've been experimenting with other flours, and I like to use organic flours, like the entire berry, if you will. So I grind my own. I get it from a local organic mill and grind my own flour. And this is actually made with corn flour. And as you can see, it's a really nice height, and it smells, again, just like that cake that I used to have when I was a little boy back from the early 60s. I'm going to give this a little taste for you. It's got that crunchiness of the poppy seeds and a little bit of the sweetness of from the dates, and just a wonderful recipe. I encourage you to try this over the upcoming holidays.
I sometimes see poppy seed cake like in a can. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mark?
Right. Yeah, that's, actually the original recipe called for using that. And if you look closely at those, at the ingredients in the Solo brand, is one of the brands that's kind of an old brand, if you will. It has a lot of corn syrup in there, and a lot of just unnecessary ingredients, I find. But it does add another layer of sugar, and sweetness to it. But we try to stay away in our vegan, whole food, plant-based diet. We stay away from any of those corn syrups, and so I just get a full jar of just plain old poppy seeds and put them in there. All right. So the next recipe that I'd like to do is a matzo ball soup. So for this week, Hanukkah started yesterday, and I've called this recipe Uncle Mark's matzo ball soup. And Chef AJ, I think this one's in the show notes, right?
It absolutely is. And so is the poppy seed cake. We could only fit 2 because we're limited to 5,000 characters.
Right, great. So the matzo ball soup, I really enjoy this recipe. So the first thing we're going to do is make some matzo balls. I've got my Instapot boiling here, so I like to use my Instapot, especially when I'm doing cooking demonstrations like this. And but the Instapot's just a great addition to anyone's kitchen. Is if you're new to being whole food plant-based, I find that this is just a great addition, because you could do in this Instapot, I could do air frying, I could do boiling, I could do sauteing, I could of course pressure cooking, doing beans and so forth. But what I've got here is I've got 8 cups of water, and that's heating up nicely. I'm going to make some of my matzo balls at this point. And what goes in our matzo balls is essentially 1 cup of matzo ball meal. I'll go right in there. And then a 1/4 cup of potato starch. You could use corn starch. That's my wife's off camera coaching me here. Corn starch, but I'm using potato flour. And then also what goes in this is parsley and cilantro and fresh dill. So we just want to mix that all up. I like to use my hands, get my hands right in there. And also what goes in here is some nutmeg, baking soda, baking powder, and then I have made this matzo recipe no salt. So we have some no salt seasoning. That's going to go in there, and just kind of mix that all up. Get your hands right in that, and then some fresh ginger. You could use powdered ginger. I just think the fresh ginger, grated fresh ginger, just kicks that up a whole other notch.
You know, Mark, believe it or not everybody knows what matzah is, what matzah balls are, where to buy matzah meal. Maybe you could talk a little bit about it.
Yeah,
And also,
yeah.
also just wanted you to know there's some fellow Food for Life instructors watching, and they asked if you could sing.
You know, so I watched Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga last night, right? And so I was wondering if somebody was going to ask me to sing. So how about this? In honor of Tony Bennett, I left my heart in San Francisco. That's about it.
The only problem is whenever we do that, then we get a copyright infringement. We're gonna take the video down and edit it, but hopefully, I don't know how YouTube catches that so fast.
Oh. See, if I would have known I was asked to sing, I would have wrote a special song for you, Chef AJ.
Well, we'll have to have you back with your special matzo ball song. Where do you get matzo meal? I haven't seen it in Indio, actually.
Yeah, so matzo meal, we just went to our local grocery store. We have an Italian market, and it's a really large Italian market, and they carry all different types of ethnic foods and condiments and so forth. The brand that I'm using is Manischewitz, right? What's in matzo meal is it's unbleached, unbromated wheat flour and water. So, but I know people that are kosher, that will maintain a kosher diet, you'll of course want to use a brand that you're familiar with, but it comes in a container about this big, and yeah, and it's a little bit different of a texture. It's a little bit coarser than like your typical wheat flour. It's almost like a breadcrumbs, right? And there you have it. So yeah, and I would go to any grocery store, any grocery store that has an ethnic section, and you should be able to find it there.
And it's gluten-free, right?
It is gluten-free. All right, so we're gonna put that in there, and now I'm gonna use the original recipe called for oil, but of course we're oil-free. So I've got my cooking liquid from the garbanzo beans, and we're just gonna put a little bit of cooking liquid in there, and get your hands in there. Keep your hands in there, and just kind of mix things up really good. And keep adding a little bit more water, aquafaba, I should say. Which, Glenn, you might find this interesting. Aquafaba was first invented, if you will, or discovered in South Bend, Indiana.
Wow, I've always wondered was it a chef that discovered it?
It was the gentleman was actually an engineer at, I forget the name of the company, but I think he was just a chef, a part-time kind of home chef, and he was going whole food plant-based, and started, just said, let me try this stuff, and really worked out really nice. But yeah, South Bend, Indiana, who would have known, right? And it's really interesting because people will ask me, can I use any type of liquid from any beans? And the nice thing about the garbanzo beans are that the garbanzo bean liquid is very neutral in flavor. So it doesn't get, won't add any additional flavor to any of the recipes. It's very neutral liquid. So you could technically use like a red bean or kidney beans or something like that, but it might leave a little bit of residual flavor. So that's why we use aquafaba. Aquafaba too. I'm sure a lot of your viewers know that you can whip that up like whipped cream, and it can actually make meringues from there as well. if you want to see a heck of a demonstration on aquafaba and the use of aquafaba, I'm a fan of the great British baking show. And about 3 or 4 years ago, one of the episodes, they had a vegan week, and they made all different types of tortas with all aquafaba. It's pretty amazing. So anyways, so now we're going to take our matzah, and this has got to go in the refrigerator for about an hour before we add it to our soup. And so it gets really nice and stiff. And so now we could form it into little balls. So let's go ahead and make our soup. Our soup is a pretty simple soup, actually. And first of all, I've got some water boiling here. I've got like 8 cups of water boiling. And what's going to go in there is carrots. So I just I sliced up some carrots. That'll go in there. I'm just going to turn my Instapot up a little bit here. 1 second, get that nice and warm.
Did you figure, how did he discover that aquafaba could make whipped cream?
I don't know if the gentleman just started, playing with it and whipping it up, and it's really amazing. The first time I used aquafaba, I was like, are you really kidding me? But it's essentially, just get your beaters out and start whipping it up, and it just adds. You're really just like egg whites. You're adding air to the aquafaba, and it takes a little bit longer to beat the aquafaba, to get the aquafaba to beat up like whipped cream. And then you also do want to add some cream of tartar to it to stabilize, about 1/8 teaspoon for like a can of aquafaba from that liquid, and that'll stabilize that whipped aquafaba as well. And then you could cook with it and so forth. But
nice.
Yeah, I don't know the entire story. I guess there's actually on the website aquafaba.com. There's all kind of recipes on there too. So it's really fascinating. Okay, so what else is going to go in here is some celery in there, and then kohlrabi. So kohlrabi is really an interesting vegetable. It's in the same family as Brussels sprouts and cabbage and cauliflower, and it's got a very mild flavor. It's a winter vegetable, so now's the time to get that. So I guess that's why it works really good with a matzo ball soup here in the winter time. It has a really nice flavor. So I've just diced that kohlrabi up. Put that in there, and then we're going to put leeks. So leeks are going to go in, and then some onions, and then no soup is good without some good old-fashioned garlic. So I'm going to prep some garlic up as well.
Hey, Mark, Marlene wants to know if you have a good latke recipe.
A latke recipe. Boy, I don't. What is typically in a latke? It would be
Potatoes. Well, it's usually grated russet potatoes with onion and flour, and then they're deep fried in oil.
Oh yeah, so you'd want to bake those. I just saw a recipe come across my computer just a couple of days ago for latke. So they were baked. So that would be what you'd have to do. So I'm gonna peel some garlic. So I gotta tell you, Chef, I do a class a few times a year. I call them cooking hacks classes, and how to reduce your time, because I know a lot of times when people are new to being vegans, one of the things I tell all my students is you got to learn to cook. I mean, it's just the nature of this thing. So I talk about my kitchen hacks, and I've got about 30 hacks I share with people to really decrease their time and make their cooking a little easier. One of the things that I always tell people to use is a bench scraper. I just love my bench scraper, especially ones like with a little yardstick on there, if you will, a little ruler on there. So if you're cutting vegetables or cutting some pastry or something like that, you've got your measuring stick right on here, if you will. And I like to use a metal one. It's just really, really durable. And I'm going to show you a little trick. So one of the kitchen hacks, so I've showed you one little hack I tell all my students in my kitchen hacks class about is getting a bench scraper. The other one is about peeling garlic. So I learned this trick. You probably remember this gentleman, Chef Jean Clef, Chef, the French chef. He showed me how to do this, and all we do is we just cut that little nub off of each of the garlics and just whack it with your knife, and it just jumps right out of the garlic skin.
Or you could just do what I do and buy it already peeled.
You could buy it already peeled. That's cheating though, right? The other thing I do is smash it with my bench scraper as well. But I had one student say, she came to the class and I showed, this was one of my first hacks. She said, oh my God, she said, I sit down at a TV with my TV at favorite program, and I sit and I peel my garlics for a half hour. You just showed me how to, do a garlic in just a few minutes. And I said, yep, it's really, that's the whole point of finding all these little tricks when we're cooking to really decrease our time. Certainly buying them all pre-peeled already is helpful as well. So now I'm just gonna let this boil, and this is gonna have to boil for about 10 minutes until it comes up to a boil. Alrighty.
Mark, what's your vegan story? When did you first hear about a plant-based diet? And
Sure. So my vegan story really started, probably about 25 years ago, actually. So my wife and I were vegetarians, and we really went vegetarian because of our health. And we decided to cut out red meat initially, then we cut out chicken. And then I was actually a pescatarian for about the last 25, actually going on almost 30 years. And my weight kept going up, and my blood pressure kept going up, and my cholesterol kept going up. And in the meantime, over the 25 years or so, we ended up losing an aunt and an uncle, both my parents and both my wife's parents, all to diseases that everybody always thought was old age, right? So my uncle died of a stroke, and an aunt that died of heart disease. My father had colon cancer, my mother had breast cancer. My father-in-law had heart disease since he was about 47 and died at 87. And my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's. So, consequently, we were executives, of course, and helped all those people at the end of life and helped them make decisions and so forth. So we sat, countless number of hours, countless number of days, not to mention the emotional toll with these individuals, with our loved ones. And 4 years ago now, my wife and I were on vacation, and we were pescatarian, so it's eating fish and chicken, and we kind of took a couple steps back and said, what do we got to do different so that we don't end up suffering like our loved ones did? And that really caused us to look deep into the research. And we had donated money to PCRM in the past for Rodney's Fund. So Rodney's Fund is to support their anti-animal abuse and our arm of PCRM, and started reading more through PCRM and then other literature, and then just decided, enough is enough. That based on all the literature, based on all the research, that this was probably our best bet to live a healthy and happy life. What ended up happening then was, as we dove more and more into the research, I had lots of changes go on with my work, and then was looking for an encore career. and kind of what do I want to do, as I approach 60. I'll be 60 the end of next month, actually. And being members of PCRM, they advertise food for life instructors. My wife brought the magazine. That PCRM has a magazine called Good Medicine. She brought the magazine to me one day and said, "Look, they've got this food for life instructor. This is perfect for you." And the rest is history. So I applied and became a food for life instructor. It was March of 20. So right when the pandemic was kind of rocking and rolling is when I completed my training and was certified. But it was really a process over time of us becoming just aware of how dangerous and how damaging food is to our health. And as we look back on what we ate, and a lot of times, we would say in the medical field that, well, diseases run in the family. Well, we know that, that there is a genetic component to it, but what really runs in the family is the same dinner table and the same recipes. I think about that poppy seed cake that I made. It was originally my Aunt Marie's, who died back, I think she was like the early 90s. She died of pancreatic cancer. But those are the types of things that we ate when we were growing up, all those fatty foods that were made with animal products and so forth. And now we know from the research that we can live much healthier lives into old age if we look at our diet and we change our diet. So that's kind of my story.
Well, aren't you wondering now what took you so long?
Well, really, especially Chef, and I know this part of your story too. I had struggled with my weight my entire life. So I was a classic yo-yo dieter. I think one of my first diets I went on when I was in my early 20s, I found this book called Diets Don't Work. And basically the book was about eating whatever you wanted to eat, whatever you want to eat, and but just eat smaller portions, right? So that didn't last really long. And then I went on, countless other diets. And then Oprah's diet back in the 90s, her 10 top tips, and they worked wonderful for me. But unfortunately, I was running 5 miles a day and basically starving myself, and that was unsustainable. And then now, at almost 60 years old, going on 4 years, I've lost 40 pounds. My cholesterol is back to where it was when I was in my 20s. My blood pressure runs 106/70. I'm on no blood pressure medicine. And I think back when my in-laws and my parents were in their 60s, they had this whole counter full of medicine all the time, and the expense and everything. And, knock on wood, we won't be doing any of that. And it's not that people say, "Well, what do you want to live forever, Mark?" I said, "No, I don't want to live forever. I just want to die well." I want to die. I want to enjoy the last, this next, few decades, hopefully, and not spend all that time in doctor's offices. I liken this diet to putting on a seatbelt when you get in your car. You've got the people that are naysayers about seatbelts, right? But this diet is just like putting on a seatbelt. I may still get in an accident. I still may have a health scare, but my chances of surviving because of my diet. I mean, we know that with COVID now, right? With all the comorbidities, and there's lots of research that's come out now as well that demonstrates that people that are vegans you might still get COVID, but you likely won't get as sick, or you won't wind up in the hospital. So think about that when you sit down at the dinner table or the breakfast table or for lunch, and put that seatbelt on. Put that seatbelt on by the choices that you put on your plate. All right, so my soup's boiling away here, and what I'm going to do next is make my matzo balls. And you want to make matzo balls about the size of a tennis ball, or a ping pong ball, I should say. And we're just going to drop those right in the soup, and they're going to need to cook for about 20 minutes in the broth here. So I'm just going to make about 5 or 6 of them. So we'll dish them up. You don't want to leave these in the soup, after it's done cooking and then store it in the refrigerator. What I would recommend is you can make up a full batch of soup, leave the matzo balls out separate, refrigerate them, and then make your dough when you're ready to reheat some of the soup. And that'll just keep them all intact. But it's real important to make sure you refrigerate your dough for about an hour prior. All right. So we're just going to leave those just go ahead and cook in there. And there we go. And those will just boil for, probably about another 15 minutes or so, 15 or 20 minutes until, they're cooked through. So there you have it. All right. I've got one more recipe. How does that sound?
It sounds great.
Okay. All right. So my next recipe is an Orzo recipe, and it is my one pan Orzo with spinach and tofu. So this recipe, again, I am big into textures and memories around food. And that's probably one of the things that makes it so difficult for people to transition to a whole food plant-based diet, is because there's so much of our history and who we are and how we were brought up, and good times and bad times as well around food. And this particular recipe, I used to love feta cheese and garlic and olive oil. And this recipe, I tried to really reproduce that traditional Orzo and spinach and feta recipe through a whole food plant-based recipe. So what I've got here is I've got a little bit of water. I'm just going to heat my pan up. Really nice. One of the other things I tell my students is, you don't really need to be fancy with all your pans and cooking utensils. A lot of times I have students that'll ask me, Mark, what do I need to buy to be a whole food plant-based, go on a whole food plant-based diet? What do I really need in my kitchen? I said, well, what you really need is a good pan, right? And some basic utensils like, your chef's knives and spoons and forks and things like that. What the nice to have are your Instapots and your high-speed blenders, your immersion blenders. But if you're just getting into it, go simple. So I tell them about this Faberware pan. So this Faberware pan was a wedding present to my wife and I back 35 years ago. It still works, and it's really simple, really simple pan, and it's stainless steel. So you really don't need anything super fancy to be whole food plant-based cook. So in there is going to go some green onions, and I'm gonna saute those green onions and just kind of let that water boil out a little bit and start to brown.
Okay, so here's a question that I didn't see from Susan, because when people watch on Facebook, I can't really see what they're saying.
Sure.
I recommend people watch on YouTube where I can see the chat without jumping screens. She said, with the aquafaba, you said you use it as a stabilizer. What stabilizer did you use? I'm not sure.
Oh, so to stabilize the aquafaba, so when you whip it up, so it'll whip up actually like egg whites. Okay, so you're gonna get it in a bowl and whip it up just like you would an egg white. To stabilize you'll whip it to like a stiff peak if you're gonna use it as like a whipped cream or make a meringue. So to stabilize the aquafaba, once you whipped it to that stiff peak, if you will, you add 1/8 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar, and that's what stabilizes the aquafaba. Okay. So it's actually the cream of tartar that's stabilizing it.
Thank you.
Okay. We're just gonna saute those nicely. And then I'm gonna do some of my garlic again. Get done really, really quick here. So I love garlic. There's probably just about every dish that I make, you know, for dinner, I put some kind of fresh garlic in there. It's just a nice addition to almost any dish.
What did you end up having for your Thanksgiving dinner, Mark?
So we had I made stuffing, a bread stuffing, and let's see, I also made a turkey roast, if you will. It was with beans and vital wheat gluten. And we had mashed potatoes. We actually had dinner at friends of ours that are not vegetarian, but you know they've known now for several years that we're vegans, and they asked us for recipes. So they made some. Mashed potatoes for us. They also made a flourless vegan chocolate cake. And then, and the other thing, Chef, that I made was your mousse, your sweet potato mousse.
Oh,
So
yeah.
love the sweet potato mousse. If y'all there listening haven't tried Chef AJ's sweet potato mousse before, you really should.
Thank you.
It's sweet potatoes, pears, roasted sweet potatoes, roasted pears, and apple pie spices. And people cannot believe that it's just those three ingredients. There's no sugar in it.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's just wonderful. And then a green salad as well. Okay, so now my onions are cooking up nicely here. I'm just gonna, you know, people are often freaked out that, boy, aren't they sticking? Aren't your onions sticking? So I'm just gonna put a little bit of water in there and just loosen up all those beautiful brown bits. And then we're also gonna put some no salt seasonings, whatever your favorite no salt seasoning is gonna go in there. And I'm gonna put my spinach in there, and then the orzo. And now this should really cook for about 20 minutes. And we just put the lid on it, and away it goes. And then we'll finish it up with some tofu. So I've just torn tofu up into little chunks like this, and some green onions, as well as some little green peas. And then I'm going to dress it with some lemon zest and my nutritional yeast that I've got over here. So we're just gonna let that cook up a little bit, and there we have it. So my matzo balls are cooking up really, really nicely. I'm going to show you what they look like. They kind of they swell a little bit as you start cooking them. Okay? Swell up really, really nicely. So a couple of the other recipes that are in Glen's book. I have a recipe for barbecue grilled herb potatoes and onions. So it's one of those recipes too that was handed down from actually my mother-in-law. I think the first time we had a barbecue back, 40 years ago, she made a little aluminum foil packet of potatoes and green onions, potatoes and white onions, and some herbs, and of course put the olive oil on the top of that and everything. Where in this recipe, I do is make a little aluminum packet of the 6 russet potatoes, sweet onions, some broth, and no salt seasoning, and some smoked paprika, and wrap that up into a nice little foil packet. You can put it on a grill, put it in the oven, and just steam those potatoes for about 40 minutes or so, and you're good to go. So that's another recipe. And then the other recipe I have that I was gonna do today as well was roasted asparagus, tomatoes, spinach, and pasta. So basically, in this one, you roast your vegetables, and cook them in a pan just like that. So if we might not have time today. It looks like we probably got about 10 minutes left. So I'm not sure.
You know what? I don't have another show till 2. If you'd like to go over, you're welcome to. It's totally up to you, Mark.
Okay. Sounds good. Just cooking these guys up. We're just going to see how this. Yeah, this is going pretty good there. I think these are just about done.
And I'd love for you to talk about that travel thing that Glenn was talking about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So actually it's interesting how things happen. Everything happens for a reason. So here we are mid-COVID, and I was just licensed as a Food for Life instructor. And unfortunately, can't do any of the classes in person, so we're doing them all virtually. So a little bummed about that, because I really wanted to, work in the community with people in my community. But on the good news of it has been that I've met people from all over the country and all over the world. Actually, I've had people in classes from East Coast to West Coast. I have people in Hawaii, Australia, Scotland, and somebody from New Zealand actually as well. So one of my classes was actually about a year ago. So one of my most popular classes is, I call it, no calorie counting weight loss. I had it last January, and I talk in that class. It's based on PCRM's Kickstart program, a 21-day Kickstart program. But what we do is we teach people the way to lose weight without counting calories. So it's doing things like eating low fat, eating high fiber, so it fills you up, being aware of those foods that also cause you to overeat, right? So there's a lot of foods are engineered. So potato chips, for example, that are salty and fat, and there's a reason why we overeat those, because they're engineered in such a way that before you know it, you're eating a bag of chips and you're down to the bottom. That was part of my problem with my yo-yo diet. Anyways, so in this class, it's 5 weeks class, and one of my students is Kim, who has this travel agency called Veg Johnson Journeys. So if you go to vegjohnsonjourneys.com, she and I really hit it off, and then we just started chatting and so forth. And she said, I'm really interested in starting a no oil, low fat tours. And I said, well, tell me more about this. And she said, I've been traveling. She's like, a lot of my trips are in Europe and so forth. And she said, after completing your class, I've realized how good no oil cooking is. And she, like a lot of my students, when they attend my classes, they report a weight loss in the 5 weeks of anywhere between 6 and 10 pounds just by eating a high fiber, low fat and oil cooking, and eating things off the power plate, like beans, legumes, grains, fruits, and vegetables. And she said, I really was wondering if you'd be interested in coming in doing a tour and doing a trip with me. And I said, well, let's talk about it. So the more we looked into it, we planned our first trip in March in September of next year, and it's to Maine. We rented this big house in Maine, and it's already sold out. It was sold out within like a couple of weeks. And then I'm talking with her, and I said, Kim, that's March. And at the time, this was like the summertime. And I said, what about doing something sooner in 2022? Because there's this pent up demand now for travel, right? And so she started looking and came up with another location in Charleston, South Carolina. So we rented another big house, and that one sold out in 2 weeks. And so then we started talking more about how successful it is, how quickly it sold out, and it's limited to like 16 people. which includes Kim and myself, and then my wife's my sous chef, assists with all the prep and everything. So it's a small group. We've got a house. All the tours it's all included. The price is everything's included. Tours and the meals, transportation. The only thing you've got to pay for is getting yourself to Charleston or getting yourself to Portland, Maine, in that instance. So she said, well, what about let's start looking at 23. And as we kind of went on this conversation and on this journey together, so to speak, she said, what about doing trips around state parks or national parks? So we've got our first trip now in 23, in April of 23, to Zion National Park. So having been to Zion, if you've been to Zion, you just know how gorgeous Zion National Park is in Utah. We're also near Bryce Canyon. We're near the north rim of the Grand Canyon and then Kodachrome State Park. So we've got this enormous house rented in April, at the end of April 23. So if you go to vegjohnsonjourneys.com, you go to the trip for Utah, and Kim's got we've got a special right now, an early bird special that if you book now to hold a spot, you'll be able to reserve your spot for 2023. So I'll do all the cooking for the trips, and I've also planned the meals around around dishes that are very specific to that region. So, for example, Charleston, we're doing a lot of things like crab cakes. We're doing things like certain, scrambles that are more seasoned to what the Southeast would be accustomed to. You got up to Maine, I'm doing lobster rolls. And in fact, I've got some menus here. I can go ahead and read out. So for breakfast, we're doing Johnny cakes. So Johnny cakes are basically cornmeal cakes. They're specific. They're more endemic to Charleston. Savory breakfast grits. We're doing whole grain biscuits and gravy. Right. Again, this is all going to be oil-free, low-fat, vegan meals. For lunch, I'm doing a mac and cheese. In Maine, we're doing a seafood tofu scramble. I'm doing hoagies. So hoagies are, believe it or not, Maine. When the Italian miners came to Maine, they brought a lot of their foods, and hoagies are one of the things that the miners would eat. So we're doing those types of things. Kennebec baked potato bake, and then in Utah in April. So that's the trip that we have spots available. I'm doing a menu that's specific to Native Americans, that's honoring the Native American tradition. So things like cornmeal mush, acorn nut bread with prickly pear cactus jelly, wild rice and cranberry salad, green chili tomato pie, Three Sisters soup, a Dutch oven pot roast, and corn and chili squash. So I'm really trying to be, sensitive to the area that we're going to be in, that it's going to be meals that are whole food, plant-based, vegan, of course, and low fat. And what we're finding, and a lot of your listeners may resonate with a lot of your listeners, is that we're finding people that two things is one, they have been on a whole food plant-based journey. They've started to travel, and they realize that there's just no way we could enjoy ourselves because there's not the restaurants out there and the availability to eat like we like to eat. Number one. Number two is, we're doing so well on this diet. My husband or my significant other, my wife, what have you, is recovering from heart disease. We're doing really well. We're turning things around. And we're just afraid to travel because we don't want to set ourselves up to go back to the old ways of eating. So we're finding people that they find places like Charleston, and here we're going to Maine, or now we're going to Utah. So we're finding people that are really just excited that they're going to get whole food plant-based. Somebody like myself that's PCRM trained. We're going to do some education too. We'll do some cook-alongs, right? We'll have some fun. But you also get to do all the tours, and everything's taken care of. So all you got to do is get yourself there. We'll do all the travel arrangements and so forth. So should be a lot of fun. And then we'll be planning 4 more trips in 2023 to other state parks. We're talking about like Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Rocky Mountain National Park, places like that. So exciting stuff.
It sounds fabulous.
Yeah. Okay. So I think my matzo ball soup is done. I'm gonna scoop some of that out. And I do have some classes coming up. I've got my kitchen hacks class this week. I've got a class. I've got another one next week. I've got a brunch class of making a holiday brunch meal. And then the other class I have is last minute holiday preparation. And you can get to my classes if you go to my website, let'seatgreat.com, and you'll see right in the middle of the page, classes and tours, and click on that, and then you'll see a registration page, and would love to see some people in my class. So here's our matzo ball soup. You can see how simple that was. The matzo balls are just done perfect. I'm just going to give this a taste for us. Very, believe it or not, it's matzo balls. I've had matzo balls in the past, and I think it's because of the lard and the fat that was made. So the traditional ones at a deli, they were like heavy, and kind of feel them sitting in your stomach. These are light. The soup is fresh. There's no salt in this. I know a lot of your listeners are SOS or salt free as well. So there's no salt in this. Actually, any of these recipes that I'm making, they can all be made, obviously without salt. Really, perfect time of the year too, with the cold weather and everything, and now for the Hanukkah season as well. So my orzo is cooking away here.
A couple of questions. Laura Beth says, I live an hour from Portland, Maine. How can I stay updated when you'll be there?
That'd be great. So if you go to Veg Johnson Journeys, and you can sign up for Kim's newsletters, Veg Johnson Journeys newsletters. You can go to my website at let'seatgreat.com. I have a newsletter as well, so I keep people up to date with our trips and travels and all that kind of good stuff. And my orzo is cooking away here. I'm just going to taste this a little bit for us, and orzo's just about done. Maybe just a little bit more water here.
Jerry, who's watching live, says it smells delicious, and I don't think she can even smell it.
Chef, if we could figure out a way to do like smell-o-vision, probably showing my age, when I used to watch the Jetsons when I was a little kid, right? They used to have smell-o-vision.
Jetsons.
You love the Jetsons, yeah.
I love the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, 3 favorite shows. Sylvia says,
right.
on your retreats, are there gluten-free options available?
Yeah, so I really appreciate that question. Thank you very much. So we're going to do a couple of things. Obviously, we know that they're vegan, the whole food, plant-based. We're also going to survey all the attendees on our trip prior, just to make sure there are no food allergies. So things like corn, things like gluten, any of those types of things, chocolates, of course. Peanuts. So we will survey people. So if you are gluten-free and you're on our trip, we will survey you and make sure that we have gluten-free options, because I know that's really important. That's a big part of travel, right? Enjoying the food. So another tip that I have for people is, if you're traveling and you're afraid of you're not going to find restaurants, bring your food along. My wife and I and a couple of friends of ours, we went to Glacier last year, which, oh, by the way, we're also talking about Glacier National Park in 23 as well, renting a house. But we went to Glacier, and we've got this cooler that's like 4 feet long and about 3 feet deep, and we packed it with all of our food and took it along with us. We went to upstate New York in June and did the same thing. You know, I had a student when I was teaching a class, and the student said to me, you know, I was telling her that we're preparing all this food and taking it with us and showing her the containers and everything, because I want people to start thinking about how to stay whole food plant-based even when you travel, right? And she looked at me, she said, but isn't that a lot of work? And I said, well, you know what's really a lot of work is getting diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure and having to sit in the doctor's office. That's a lot of work. And you got a good point. So think about that. What's more work, and why are you doing your diet? That's the other thing I also tell my students, and especially those in my weight in the no calorie counting weight loss. Be really clear on why you're whole food plant based. And especially when you're getting started and watching what you're eating, write it down. Be conscious of that, because we're Americans, I think especially, we're just so unconscious when we eat. So that's one of the things with this diet that I have found, you know, in my almost 60 years now, that you cannot, you know, in this diet, I have experienced and tasted more food, more flavors, different types of vegetables and grains than I ever knew existed. You know, like Orzo. You know, I never really cooked with Orzo before, but now, you know, it's like one of my staples, right? And so I'm just going to finish this dish up with some tofu, and then we're going to put some fresh green onions and peas in here. And then my last little dressing is going to be some lemon zest. It's going to go in there.
So here's a question from Mojo. Is there a vegan version of matzo meal? But matzo meal is vegan. It's just
it is vegan. Yeah, it's vegan. It's so it's matzo meal is unbleached, unbromated wheat flour and water. So you know what? I think you'd asked if it's gluten free. Well, this has got wheat flour, so it's not gluten free. All right. But this is vegan. Yeah, there is no nothing that would tell me that it's vegan. However, that viewer asks a really good question, just in terms of, you know, is that product vegan? So we've got to read the labels, people. We've got to read the labels if we're vegan. So one of the stories I tell in my class is using certain types of foods, like, for example, breadcrumbs. So panko breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs, you would think that they're 100%, you know, vegan, right? But read the label. We were using these panko breadcrumbs, and one of the ingredients in there was cheese. You know, they use some Parmesan cheese. Again, why? Well, it's probably because it adds some of the texture and some of the flavor and so forth. So be really conscious of that you're reading the labels and making sure that they are 100% vegan. So I would suspect that somewhere, you know, one of these brands might have some kind of dairy in it, but this one doesn't. This brand does not have any dairy or any animal products at all. All right, so our Orzo and tofu is done. Let's kind of plate that up a little bit. You see, got some nice, and I like to add the peas at the end. It keeps them nice and bright. And got our tofu in there. And I'm just going to add some nutritional yeast. Sprinkle a little nutritional yeast on there. And there we go. All right. How does that look today?
it looks amazing. You're going to have a great meal today.
I think so. Yeah, that's one of the things with cooking at home is all these things that we make, we end up then refrigerating and eating for the next week. So I end up cooking for class or a demonstration like this, like once, and then we're set for the whole week. So, anyways.
Wow. Well, Mark, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear about all your ventures.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we love to see people on one of our trips. So if you go to vegjohnsonjourneys.com or come to let'seatgreat.com, and we have our trips posted on both of those. And Kim also has lots of trips in Europe as well. She does all vegan tours as well, so you might want to check some of those out. I'm not going to be on those. We won't be cooking on those. There's restaurants that she plans all ahead of time, so you take a look at those. And hope to see you in one of my classes as well.
That's still pretty awesome. Thanks. This was a wonderful presentation. I can't wait to try the poppy seed cake.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live as part of this special Food is Climate Week. Please remember, if you get the book, you can send your receipt to the email in the show notes and get many bonus recipes. And please come back today at 2 p.m. for a bonus show with Janine Roth. She's been on Oprah. She's a best-selling author, and she wrote many books, including one that I'm very, very fond of called Women, Food, and God. Take care again, Mark. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays, everybody.